I'm Robert Dakota of Worldviews Media, and I'm here to introduce you to Sacha Stone, in case any of you don't already know him. We're really excited to be hosting him here in February, which is just coming up here in 10 days. For anyone who is still thinking about coming, we still do have some tickets, and they are going fast. So Sacha, thank you so much for taking the time to join us. I know you've got a lot of things going over there in LA. Welcome.
Great pleasure. Thank you, Robert. Greatly looking forward to seeing you in just over a week from now as well.
Nice. Well, you picked a hot topic. I don't know if you are aware of that. Hopi prophecy has always been a hot topic around here. And since the atomic bomb was dropped on Japan, elders have been going to every president ever since and delivering a letter of the Hopi prophecy and the warnings. And looks like we're approaching the gates of the great reveal.
Indeed. I mean, that for me, the importance about the Hopi seemed to be, in a sense, the most prophetic First Nation community out of 740 odd non-federally recognized so-called tribes in North America. I think there's about 500 odd that are federally recognized, but 740 odd beyond that. And out of all of those extraordinary First Nation peoples, the Hopis seem to hold a very unique signature in terms of the prophecy. And of course, their prophecy relates to the black skin, brown skin, red skin, white skin peoples of the world, and how each of the primary genomic types of humanity went forth and were able to play, so to speak, in this realm with one element or the other, whether it was the element of fire or water or air or sky. And uniquely here, the white man was given, in a sense, the element of fire to go forth and play with. And of course, we did go forth and play with fire, with Oppenheimer and Einstein ultimately contriving the atomic bomb and the unbearable destructivity that came as a direct result of splitting the atom in the late 1930s with the Pacific Atoll testing and then the rocket testing that went on for decades, causing untold suffrage in the world connected to cancers and what have you, the depleted uranium in the atmosphere of the Earth, contaminating and raining down to this day on every biological system. So the Hopi certainly got it right when it came to white man going forth and playing with fire.
Have you been up to Hopi or met with Hopi elders before?
No, I've met with a number of the First Nation peoples and some of the elders and some of the chiefs or paramount figures in the First Nations. Of course, it's a very, very convoluted and complex landscape to navigate, certainly for a white skin like me. But as you know, Robert, I'm at the beginning of a very ambitious journey working with a number of the seminal leadership in the First Nations of North America to bring together a gathering of the First Nations in 2025. Well, we're making announcements about that in the course of the next week, and certainly at the events with you, I'll be going to some great length on the subject of this very noble and historic initiative that we're kicking off.
Yeah, it's going to be cool to introduce these guys to you. I think you're really going to enjoy what they have to share. Ruben Sufki will be bringing a life-size poster board of Prophecy Rock. And right now, that's really a hard place to get to unless you have a very specific guide. And he'll be bringing the Eagle Dancers with them for Saturday afternoon. And then Grandfather Malava will bring the Prophecy Kachina, which is also a very rare artifact. And his grandfather and father were famous kachina artists with their kachinas in the Hurt Museum. So he's carrying a very long lineage.
Terrific. Well, more than anything, I greatly look forward to learning from my brothers.
Mhm. Yeah, me as well. I always enjoy it. They've got so much to share, and so much is mind blowing. It can sound like science fiction sometimes, you know.
Oh, it's weird. It's weirder than science fiction. I think it's safe to say. I mean, we get into the extraterrestrial dimensions of the cosmology of these First Nation peoples and their customs and laws, and yeah, going back to off-world, it becomes incredibly fascinating. I remember David Icke revealed, is a dear friend, revealed to the world the great Zulu Sangoma Credo Mutwa a number of about 20 or 30 years ago. And I never got to meet Credo Mutwa, but he was an extraordinary Sangoma or oracle of the Zulu nation of Southern Africa. And you know, one looked at him with the sort of bones around his neck and all the weird paraphernalia and the wand and the rod and all that and the Zulu blankets. And you know, you have a certain idea of these First Nations and their customs and where they come from and how primitivist they must be. And then when you start to have conversations with them, as David Icke did famously with Credo Mutwa, and Credo Mutwa ends up saying, "Oh yeah, you know, back in the 1950s in the Matopus Hills of Southern Africa, you know, he stumbled across, you know, an alien base, you know, was taken underground into this alien base and had all sorts of strange things performed on him, and then went on as a result of that experience to seek to become a Sangoma or an oracle of a shaman priest of the Zulus, and had to go into a particular rite of passage in order to qualify as a Sangoma. And what was that rite of passage? Well, fuck me, if it wasn't having to go for 3 days and nights underground into be buried in a cave underground with two other initiates. But first they had to eat a piece of flesh of an alien gray Zeta reticulum, which the Zulu nation apparently have kept in cold storage. That's a joke. You don't need to keep Zeta reticulum flesh in cold storage. But by best accounts, the Zulu nation do have alien grays, and they, you know, the Sangoma initiates have to choose some of this flesh, which Credo Mutwa said was disgusting, and he said he chewed it. It tasted like an old British brass coin, and some metallic and astringent taste, and was buried for 3 days with these other initiates. One of them died in the process of going into an extraordinary psychedelic trip after eating the flesh of the alien. And the other two guys, including Credo Mutwa, survived the experience and went on to be sworn in, so to speak, as a Sangoma of the Zulu people. But I illustrate that just to explain how prejudiced we are in looking at some of the indigenous folk and First Nation peoples and Aboriginal peoples of the world and going, oh, well, very simple, primitivist folk living in mud huts. No, incredibly sophisticated, cosmogenetically speaking, and psycho-intellectually speaking, way, way, way beyond the kind of binary dualistic logic framework of the average Westerner, you know. Anyway, I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, I've had the privilege of hearing a lot of these guys talk, and I don't know if you're familiar with Clifford Mahudi. He's a Zuni elder who is also an engineer. He grew up in both worlds, and he grew up near Area 51, so he went to school with the kids of the scientists out there. And he's not only got the stories of the Star People, but he's been involved with the governments, working with all the, as you mentioned, the federally recognized tribes.
Right.
And they've got some wild stories. They see star beings all the time. Like it's nonchalant for them. It's not something that's wild.
Right, that's right. The same thing with the Mayans. I mean, I'm living now in Mexico on the Mayan Riviera and working closely with some Mayan folk there as we develop out our New Earth Sanctuary project, which I'm also going to be, incidentally, Robert, going into great length and in unveiling the vision of what we're actually doing in Mexico, which is an extraordinary project. But the Mayans themselves are very, very familiar with the subject of orbs and UFOs and extraterrestrials. I can tell you now, I won't go into the story right here, but I did witness 2 years ago the most extraordinary alien intervention. Something occurred which myself and a group of other folks witnessed as we were swimming one evening in the Bacala Laguna, and witnessed something which I still haven't managed to compute yet or get my head around. My contextual framework of reality was completely thrown that evening with what we witnessed. But it was a bunch of us. It wasn't just me. It was a handful of us. The problem is we were in the water of the Laguna, and what we witnessed by looking back at the shore and saw this extraordinary alien edifice coming out of the jungle canopy and breaking up like Jack and the Beanstalk, literally growing up towards the sky. I estimated that it must have been about 7 to 8 stories high before I was shrieking. And I think that it stopped growing, turned as though it was a periscope, saw us observing it, and then froze momentarily, and then it recoiled in on itself. This huge edifice, it was 7 or 8 stories high, and it looked like a kind of liquid metal Jack and the Beanstalk type thing, just growing organically, but not organic. It was liquid metalloidal and yet solid. The most bizarre thing I think I've ever witnessed. And I've seen a number of UFOs and things over the years. My mind is open enough to be able to see, I think, somewhat beyond the veil, and quite happily so. My whole life it's been that way. But this particular instance was extraordinary. Unfortunately, we were in the water and we were so shocked by what we were seeing. Maybe it lasted, I don't know, 60 seconds, 70 seconds, 80 seconds, but none of us wanted to swim back to shore to get our telephones so that we could then swim out again and film it. It was, we just were too in the presence of this extraordinary event. In any event, the point I'm making is that later that day, I called my Mayan friends and staff to the ranch, and they came to sit with me, and I said, guys, I don't know what to say, but I've got to tell you, we've just witnessed the most extraordinary visitation at the Laguna. And I explained, and they kind of wryly smiled, and said, yes, well, we've seen these things for generations. Nothing surprises us here. And, oh, have you seen the kind of luminescent blue orbs, coursing their way underwater through the Laguna at night? And I'm like, no, I haven't seen that yet. But yeah, it's fascinating. And I think, Robert, the point of this, the retreat and the events that I'm doing with you is really to lean into this particular subject matter and explore it and be quite unabashed and unashamed in doing so. It's high time that we began to make sense of the ancient mystery that is in our blood song, essentially. And it is the First Nation peoples of the world who are going to be the ones to remind us of that blood song.
Yeah, this is going to be an amazing weekend. And do you think being connected, were you really connected to nature when you were a kid and out in nature all the time? Do you think that gives you some openness and vision that people growing up in the city seem to have dimmed down a little bit?
Well, I nervously giggle at that because I grew up in the middle of a bush war. So I was living behind grenade screens and security fences and guns and tanks and things for the first really 14, 15 years of my life, albeit in darkest Africa, you know, sub-Saharan Africa, under the African sky, the most exquisite nature you'll find anywhere in the world. Famously, my country, Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, where I was born and grew up, famously, the early settlers and explorers, like Cecil John Rhodes and Livingstone and others who went out at the behest of empire to carve a straight line down the spine of Africa on behalf of the Oppenheimers and De Beers gold and diamond interests, disgusting hegemony. But they were seeing and discovering that dark continent for the first time in the modern context, and they did uniformly all say this is the most beautiful country on God's earth. Rhodesia, stunningly beautiful country that I grew up in, but alas, behind grenade screens and security fences for all too much of it. But to answer the question, yes, I think that one way or the other, being African and barefoot it does create let's say, a paramagnetic connection, I think, and it anchors us and makes us more grounded as Adamites, as human beings, for sure. Hang out with any white Africans or black Africans, and you can only but agree with what I'm saying. You know, there's just less bullshit in Africans, and that's maybe because of a certain level of psychocultural austerity. I don't know. You know, things don't come too easy, and we don't have sweeties and toys in the way that or certainly didn't in the 1970s and 80s, that kids do or did in the West, you know, gaming and taking drugs and getting laid. You know, in my time in Africa as a child, and then a preteen, and then going into my early teens, there was a certain level of austerity, and I mean, I guess a certain patriarchal kind of shroud as well, having to respect, you know, your elders and all of that, which I don't agree with. Incidentally, I don't think kids should be growing up in that kind of environment in the least bit. But I do say that keeping your kids barefoot and connected to the living soil and away from the Skynet and from Metatron's playground of drugs and alcohol and the perversions that come with Western society, and obviously AI and technology, keeping kids as far away from that as possible in the formative years, to my mind, is absolutely imperative for survival of species, if nothing else.
Mhm, mhm. Well, before I let you go, I wanted to review April. We're bringing you back again, April 19th to the 21st, and the theme is energy and consciousness. And I've been speaking with this guy, Malcolm Bendall, through Randall Carlson, who has proof of concept for new clean energy or rediscovered technology. And they're bringing it to light. And all of these scientists who are involved talk about their own spiritual background and how there's direct relationship between consciousness and the energy that we create. And the kind of, can you speak to that a little bit?
Well, at the risk of going on for hours and not stopping, yes, I can speak to this subject at great length. What to say? It is directly connected. It is directly connected. And just so you know, I think I've almost got permission from my partners in Romania, including my 5-star military general, who's one of the partners. I've almost secured the permission to be able to also unveil some technological advancement, let's say, that is going to shake this world at the event. It looks as though at that time I may be in a position to do so. And if nothing else, I could probably arrange for a remote viewing of what I'm talking about. It might be too dangerous to try to have this technology on mainland US soil, but it's very exciting stuff. And I can tell you that we're there. We're pretty much there. I set up a couple of years ago with my partners in Romania a company to as a protectorate to incubate breakthrough technologies, innovations, algorithms, solutions from mostly military or former military engineers and scientists, doctors, who in the course of their careers did not necessarily offer up their algorithms and their technologies to their bosses upstairs, but actually kept them in cardboard boxes under the bed. And now in their 70s and 80s, and before they, shuffle off this mortal coil, many of them do want remedy. They do want to see humanity redeemed, and they do want their inventions and their technologies and algorithms and remedies to get to market. So I set up this company a couple of years ago in Eastern Europe in order to incubate, and we've been doing that for the last couple of years. It's very, very exciting, and we're incubating a number of technologies. So one by one, we'll start to release them and see how that fares. I've been involved in the breakthrough innovation and technology and renewable solutions game for a long time. Certainly 14, 15 years ago, I was Director General at the United Nations in the intergovernmental arena for breakthrough energy and renewable technologies, trying to get so-called free energy technologies at that time into the multilateral playing field. That's why I hacked into the godless United Nations in order to really do that and try and force it in. And Dr. David Martin, who many know his great work now, David Martin was involved with me on my team. And at that time, we were really skirting quite dangerously close to the wind in trying to force, try to create a tracking system to bring free energy technologies to the marketplace and replace the oil and gas industries with quantum breakthrough technological innovations, which existed 15 years ago. They existed 50 years ago. They existed 100 years ago. In point of fact, we were 100 years ago, we were powering up taxis in New York and in Tokyo with electrically charged vehicles, taxis. We had trolley systems and kind of public bus and trolley systems that were levitating on magnetic tiling. And I'm revealing some of the stuff in my PowerPoint presentation this weekend at the Conscious Life Expo. And then again, with you, I'll be touching on this subject and showing some images and tearing the mask off the manipulated history that we've been led to believe is our historical record, which it certainly is not. Our forebears hundreds of years ago were very, very advanced technologically. We've had anti-gravity and levitation technologies and free energy systems and subspace telephony and all sorts of extraordinary technologies. But with these cyclical resets that occur, where the Sabbatean, Masonic, occultic, Luciferic priesthoods collapse the whole of humanity through civilizational psychodrama and trauma-based mind control, essentially, that those resets that occur mind fuck us into a kind of zeroing out of reality. And then we go through a period of recovery for a few years, and then the program begins and the software gets installed. And this is what we're supposed to think about geography and about history and about geology and about astrology and astronomy and so on and so forth. So this Cartesian, Newtonian, Einsteinian bullshit model of reality is the most fucked up, reductive, dualistic, and radically stupid framing of reality, of quantum reality. And yet that is the status quo, and woe betide anyone who stands up and tries to speak against that status quo. You'll be vilified, castigated, ridiculed, marginalized, assassinated, imprisoned, for non-compliance with false light reality. So that's where we're at right now, and we need to break through this insane Hermes veil. That's the premise and the basis of my life's work, and I'm not stopping now. Yeah.
Wow, well, I'm so excited to have you come out here and join us. Real excited to be a part of this in any way, Sacha. I think you're spot on, and it's way overdue. And it seems like they've spent decades, probably millennia, developing their systems. It's not going to be unwoven overnight, but it seems like they're on their way to unweaving themselves if we can keep our center and keep our focus going.
Yes, let's just always remember in the kind of Steiner model of honor and true form, that they can only ever be the unresolved aspects of you and me. And when we make peace with that in the living moment, within the sanctity of our hearts, and then move our lives into right action and pure truth, everything begins to make sense, and the road begins to rise up to meet you, and you find yourself, essentially able to walk through that valley of death without any fear. And that's the key piece here, is understanding the relationship between fearlessness and timelessness. And with the fearlessness and timelessness comes what I call the new earth horizon, which is the return to innocence, in that sense, the return to innocence and immanence, which is the divine blueprint, the divine template that self-exists, self-reveals, and self-fulfills in every living moment. And so that essentially is where I want to drive focus and attention away from the Saturnian, Jupiterian, false light reality matrix, where foundationally rogue and incoherent images are projected onto the screen of life for us, because we are failing to step into that immanence, and we're allowing ourselves to become harvested as a utility for draconian, reptilian, Orion, lower elemental forces. That's a choice. We don't need to be harvested. We don't need to abdicate or abnegate any aspect of our divine nature. We can glow in superluminal magnificence and majesty in this world, and fuck the consequences. Just own who we are and seize every moment of every day fully, and lean into life hard, and become the arbiters and the determiners of our own outcomes.
Fantastic. Thank you, Sacha. Thank you, man. That's really beautiful. I appreciate so much your words and your articulation. Yeah.
Great pleasure, Robert.
Okay. Well, I think that takes care of it for now. We're looking forward to seeing you in Sedona, and thank you so much for your time, Sacha.
Okay, brother.